Welcome to RSA Conference 2023. It's day 3, still recording live in Broadcast Alley, Moscone West. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this segment is Michaël Lakhal. He is the Global Director of Product Management and Strategy at OneSpan. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hopefully I said that right.
Yeah,
okay,
perfect.
Good. Okay,
perfect.
Good. I haven't taken French in a while, so I just want to make sure. We're going to talk digital identity. As I was telling you before we started, I'm an app user data guy, right? I love, to me, application identity and data is where it's at in the security industry. And I'd like to see more innovation in the identity space. What you've done is some interesting things to kind of build a end-to-end holistic digital identity, starting with identity verification, which I think is interesting because right now I think one of the big challenges is how do I know who the user actually is? How do I verify that that identity is associated to a user? This concept of non-repudiation, right, is a very interesting concept. There's a lot of other use cases. We'll talk about it a little bit, but let's talk about what does identity verification look like? Let's start there and then kind of walk through the solution of how that then influences this kind of end-to-end solution.
So first of all, we need to differentiate, a known user versus non-user, because it's identity. The identity is a global, generic term, which embed identity verification, like for pure prospect, but also authentication, which is different, as you know, for banks or any type of organization. So by saying that, identity is everywhere. As you said, it became crucial right now before starting any process, you need to formally identify someone. That's so important to execute any type of transaction. And this is what we are doing at OneSpan. Now, when it comes to identity, you have different ways to do it. You have multiple, everyone here is talking about AI, for instance, this week. But also you have document verification, facial recognition, this kind of classic identification solution. What we see right now is also a new solution popping up, like a digital wallet, digital identity wallet. We know that in Europe, for instance, with EIDAS 2.0, this is an initiative, the regulation is here. It's going to come in force next year. And we know that big players like Apple and Google are investing massively on this digital wallet. So that's going to be also part of the scope of the identity, and maybe it's going to facilitate the identification of end user.
So are you primarily using a document approach for identity verification today?
Right now, yes. Because we are a global company and we need you. And the challenge with this document is to have a global coverage. You need to be able, when it comes to passport, it's pretty easy. It's a document done to travel to be recognized by any country, any entity. When it comes to document like driving license, IDs, it's more complicated. Because it's different. Even in the United States here, you have different driving license format from a state to another one. So, scanning, recognizing, make sure that the document is authentic, it's an authentic one. It's really, the challenge. And if you try to expand that globally, it's way more challenging.
Yeah. But if you do it right, now we know who the user is tied to the identity.
Exactly.
Now, once I have that allows you to do some very interesting things, right, from an authentication transaction perspective. So that's where the rest of the platform comes in, right?
Exactly, because when you've done that, you create a digital identity in your system, so you can recognize someone, and then after you can give him any type of authentication solution. It could be a mobile software authentication, could be a hardware authentication as well. We can, it depends on the level of security you expect for the type of transaction you want to perform. But we have different solutions. It could be based on fingerprint, facial recognition, any type of authentication solution. And this is right now, where most of the high regulated organization in high regulated industry are using to identify or authenticate someone.
Okay, yeah. And so now you're authenticated. What do I do with that authenticated identity now? Are you using it for financial transactions? Are you using it for secure communications, email? What are all the different use cases for this kind of technology?
You need to authenticate for anything. If you want to access to your bank account balance, for instance, so you need an authentication. But then when you authenticate, or it could be in B2E, business to employee domain, the workforce, you need to authenticate, and then you have authorization to access to this or that services. So this is the concept of CIM, IAM in general. For in the B2C world is different. I mean, you can have like a strong authentication, which allows you, to have a money transferred. So then after you can start a process of transaction signing. I'm not talking about agreement here. It's just a transaction signing a set of data to allow you to prove that you send me money, for instance, or I send you money.
Right.
And it have to be recorded, and you need to have an audit trail associated to that to prove it.
Got it. So does this solve the one identity challenge? Right. So if I think about it, I have multiple identities, right? I have multiple email accounts, I have multiple LinkedIn accounts, my Twitter account, this account, that account, right? Does this solve the mass of having multiple identities, however you do, into a single digital identity? So are you kind of federating across all these different areas? Because, to contact me, it depends on what mechanism. But if I had one single place, like, does all that come together then in this digital identity?
So first of all, we need to define, the level of assurance you expect from your identity. Like if you're using your Facebook account, like say social media account, it's not like a strong identification because it's based. But if you're using like the authentication or identification done by your bank through a KYC process, which is very defined, standardized, that's a different level. So first, we really need to differentiate, the level of assurance expected for the type of transaction you want to perform.
Yeah, but let's think about this for an online identity for a second, right? I go into eBay and I want to pay with PayPal on my credit card. By using the digital identity that has been verified, it also reduces fraud, wouldn't it?
Yes, because when you subscribe to an eBay account, you go through a KYC process. Exactly what you did with your bank. So a sort of KYC process, because the first thing, you need to fill in your credit card number. It means that you are owner of a bank account, and by definition, you went through a KYC. So we rely on the KYC done by your bank to strongly and having a high level of identification to open a eBay bank account. So you see, again, it depends on the level of assurance expected.
Yeah, but a standard credit card transaction, though, credit card fraud has been rampant for a long, long time, right? You don't go through that whole process for any normal transaction, but if you could tie that transaction with a verified digital identity, that would also reduce fraud for those basic transfer, right? So that's like the nirvana state, like one digital identity that can span all these different systems, right? So even though it might say it requires my Gmail account here and my business account there, if I can use one identity that verifies that I am who I am across the board, there's a lot of really interesting use cases you can solve for. Fraud is one, phishing is another one from an email send perspective. I'm sure there's others out there that you've thought about. Like that's the potential opportunity.
Yeah, and what you're describing is exactly, the concept of the digital wallet. The digital wallet, as you know right now, we have a wallet. We all use Apple Pay, Google Pay, or whatever, the solution for payment. So if you combine it, to your point, with a digital wallet, having a strong identity, and combine it with the payment system, you have this guarantee you expect. And you can prevent fraud, you can prevent phishing attacks, and so on. And the idea is really, having all this PII information, personal information, into one single secure storage system that you can share and pick up on the sole control of the end user. It doesn't, because a wallet, if you think about it, you can share your identity, you can share just your date of birth, you can share your address, you can also share your medical information with your doctor.
Right.
So, you don't want to share all this data with everyone.
Right.
So it has to be on your control, and make sure that you're sharing this data with that organization.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. If we can combine both, you have a high secure solution.
Yeah. It also allows you to deal with some of the privacy issues. Now, in the States, it's different than over in Europe, obviously, with GDPR and the different requirements. This would also solve some of those privacy concerns and issues as well, right?
100%. The regulation is something. The reality of this privacy is something else. It depends from, as you said, from a region to another. The approach is different, but the problem still exists.
Right.
It's a global problem. It's really a global problem. And the best way to solve it is, as you said, having one single digital identity that could be used and on the sole control of the end user.
Got it. So where are the primary use cases? Consumer, SIAM, I think is the term in the industry. I mean, is consumer like the primary use case for where you're seeing this opportunity, or are you seeing it on the workforce kind of business side as well?
I would say both, but consumer, this is the mass market. This is where the market
Right.
is, and this is most of the fraud are
Right.
now. Definitely with workforce, I mean, but there is a lot of existing solution. I mean, most of the company are already equipped, but with the consumer is really exposed right now
Right.
to this phishing alert.
Well, because they
and
don't
attacks.
have all these additional capabilities that you do in a corporate environment.
Exactly.
Right? In the corporate environment, we were talking about this also a little earlier, you've got your identity and access management provider, your multi-factor authentication provider, your SSO provider, maybe a privileged access provider. The consumer doesn't have all that. They have a Gmail account or a whatever account, like that's their identity online, and so they don't have all the other protections that a corporation would have.
Yeah, and you're right. The thing is, if you think about it, I'm working for OneSpan. Creating a OneSpan email address for you, it's quite impossible. If I want to create a Gmail address on your behalf, it's very easy.
It's very easy.
So that's why, to your point, I mean, it's exactly the difference between the B2B transaction and the B2C. The B2C is definitely more at risk.
Got it. Okay. Now, how do you? So when we think about, so we go through the process. You start using this identity. You authenticate with your token. Is there any other thing you need to do? Like, is that it? Like, well, how do you deal with things like potential risk or fraud, re-authentication, additional factors for authentication? Like, how does that all come together in the OneSpan solution?
So OneSpan, what we focus on is really, I mean, something where we need to balance the risk and the user experience. That's crucial. I mean, it doesn't make sense to highly secure something what it's not needed.
Right.
And most of the security need to be transparent for the end user. That's super important, that's crucial. I mean, you can have risk analysis, you can collect data during a transaction, and then after you can add a layer of security if needed, if you detect a suspicious activity.
Right, okay.
It could be a suspicious activity due to the device because we don't recognize it's your device. It's not the device you use to transact every day, or it could be, I mean, some things other suspicious like your geolocation, or we detect that the app is corrupted, or any kind of information we can detect, and then after we can add another layer of security if needed. That's what we call, I'm not a big fan of this term, the continuous authentication, but it has to be fully transparent for the end user.
Right, okay. Yeah, because you don't want to create friction, especially for the consumer. It's hard enough in the workforce to do it, let alone for a consumer, right? Because you don't want to slow down transactions. You want them to buy things online as easy as possible, but you also, if you're trying to eliminate fraud or protect bank accounts, et cetera, you want to put some level of security. So you're right, there's always this kind of balance between ease of use and security controls.
You know, because what's matter for our clients right now is the passing rate. I mean, you need, when you perform an authentication, identification, any transaction, it has to be completed. So if you subscribe to any kind of product, I mean, the passing rate need to be close to 100%. It's impossible to reach out to 100%,
right.
But you need to try to really to reach out as maximum as possible to 100%. That's, I mean, business-driven decision. But on the same time, it has to be secure. So this is the balance, and this is where we need to be we need to bring some intelligence into the identification and the authentication.
Yep.
So this is what we call intelligent adaptive authentication, or risk-based authentication, depends, but this is the kind of solution we can provide today.
Got it. Okay. So I love the use cases. I love the concept. Like, I wish you the best of luck, because if you can solve the identity problem, the world will be a much safer place.
Thank you. We try. We work very hard to do it. So.
All right. Thanks, Michaël.
Thank you very much.
And if you want to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/OneSpan RSAC. Stay tuned. We have more interviews coming up.